Oh, thank you so much, Professor Agar. We have time for questions. If you'd be kind enough to use the microphones and introduce yourself, that would be very helpful. Yeah.
Professor, I'm Oriane Wilson of High Rose House, and I would like to ask you how you fit paradigms into your view of the curiosity-driven science. I wasn't clear what it was you were saying about
Okay. Basically, it's a contrast. With Kuhn's model of the sciences, you obviously have periods of normal science where scientists work under a paradigm and it guides what questions they're asking, but also how they work. Mm-hmm. You know, what are good examples of good ways of solving particular scientific problems. But you're discouraged. Well, it is actually, in Kuhn's account, quite an oppressive but productive system. But then, and obviously questioning of fundamental assumptions is discouraged under Kuhn's theory, right? And as that system works, it's quite productive. But under Kuhn's argument, sooner or later you come into anomalies that can't be fixed, and you go through a period of revolutionary change where the assumptions are dug into and questioned, right? And then you have this sort of alternating periods of normal and revolutionary science. But it's a system where typically curiosity is tightly constrained. You can't be curious about the fundamental assumptions of the paradigm, otherwise it doesn't work. So that's the model that Kuhn proposed in the early 1960s. It's one which is, I think it reflects to some extent the Cold War context, actually. It reflects a world in which the world is being hunkered down and being channeled in certain directions. It's very influential for historians of science who've been arguing about it ever since. It's got its advantages, it's got its disadvantages, but in terms of curiosity, it's channeled in a particular kind of way.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think the lady with the blue scarf had a question first, and then, or not? No. Over to you.
Thank you. Sorry. Okay. Peter Collins from the Royal Society. Brilliant lecture, thank you, and brings together so many different strands of modern science policy and older science policy. Could you link a bit your discourse on curiosity with the rhetoric about the linear model and how that is used either to score cheap debating points or to defend the existence of basic research, if we can still use those words? Yeah.
I suppose, what's my view about that? Obviously, the linear model is incorrect. Okay, that's where we start from. It doesn't simply, linear model for people who have not heard the term, is this idea that you start with basic science, you then have applied science, you then have technology, then you have all these kinds of applications and economic influence, and it's a one-way channel. And if you hold the linear model, then what should you do? Well, you should obviously fund as much basic science as possible, and that will push the whole system along. Now, the trouble with that is that it doesn't stand up to historical inquiry, right? We find all kinds of influences going, the arrows go all kinds of different ways, in an interesting kind of way, right? Now, in terms of how do I think about that? Well, I think it's important to think about any of those terms, you know, the basic science, the implied science. These aren't, as I said, natural kinds. These aren't things, science and knowledge and thinking about the world and solving problems doesn't just naturally fall into those sort of categories, right? They have to be invented. And once they're invented, you can put them in the line and come up with this misleading model of how change happens, right? But that's because each of those categories is in a sense, already slightly misleading, I think. The whole system is much more complicated and much more interesting than the linear model suggests.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm Nigel Agar, and I'm just unrelated to Jon. Anyway, the question I'm going to ask is, having a background in teaching, now what you do as a teacher is you divide knowledge into manageable little chunks, and then you tell them what you're going to tell them, then you tell them, then you tell them what you've told them, and then you repeat it. And you hope someone doesn't say, is this in the syllabus? Because the photocopier is a great enemy. They know what's in the syllabus. Now, if that doesn't hammer out curiosity, what would? Now, putting all that to one side, what should you do?
Yeah, I think that those quotations where they say that formal education hammers out curiosity, I think are deeply unfair, right? My curiosity was certainly stoked at school, right? You know, I think you get good teachers and bad teachers, but generally the educational system doesn't do those things to children that I suggested, well, the scientists suggested in their quotations. However, if the suggestion is that I should say what I'm saying, say it, and then repeat it all again, I could repeat this whole lecture again. I don't think that's necessarily the way to go. But I think those are a certain view about curiosity in the educational system. Other views are available, but I think it's fascinating to see that recurrent pattern, that it's clearly linked with an image of the scientist as the person who keeps on asking why, keeps the curiosity going. And I think that's important because curiosity is so important to the image of the science. And I've suggested there are reasons for that, and it's partly to do with the way that it preserves a certain kind of social autonomy for science, which only then also makes sense because science is so practically useful eventually that relationship has to be managed. So curiosity, that's where I think curiosity becomes quite central to how we think about science, especially science in public.
We have time for one last question, I think.
Thank you very much for that. My name is Simon Schaffer. I would love you to react to this thought in the wake of the lecture. Curious, in English and in other languages, has very interesting grammatical form in that it's an adjective that refers both to the subject and the object. If we say Einstein is curious, we mean that he's inquisitive and he's very strange. And it seems to me that alongside the story that you've so well told us is the shadow story, which is the story that on the one hand wants to emphasize that scientists are absolutely not like other folk. They are the few who've survived education. Yet at the same time, an inordinate amount of cultural and real capital is spent, especially since the mid-1980s, on making sure that the image of the scientist is that she is like everybody else. So there's a dilemma inside the political genealogy of curiosity, that it must be a special kind of person who exhibits it, yet all of us do. And that dilemma, for it is that, seems to me to inform and infect precisely the story you've so well told.
Yeah, I think that's where curiosity is interesting to think about, say, in contrast to the sense of wonder, right? Now, curiosity is more associated with the child, and therefore it can be more put down as something innate that we all share, and that is quite important for the suggestion that we could all be scientists, right? It is open to everyone, right? And so the linkage is there. Wonder is different. It's different in several ways. I think Benedict points this out, or someone points this out, that wonder reflects well on both the person who's doing the wondering and the object of wonder. Curiosity is not like that. Curiosity is it doesn't it does not hold up to esteem necessarily the object nor the subject. Curios, yeah. Yes, I'm reminded here that curious, talking about etymology, curious has also got a special terminology in the second-hand book trade, where it is a word for the erotic, right? So the word curious is a very interesting one, right?
I think on that charming note, our time is up. Would you like to move to the centre of the stage? And then it's an enormous privilege to present the 2016 Wilkins-Bernal-Medawar Medal and scroll, and a small tax-free token of appreciation. Well done.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Well, I've always wanted to see what it looks like, so I'm going to open it here if I can. There it is. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you. Cheers.